I censored some ludicrous fantastic dialogues between coach horses and other such stuff, which Baretti had lately published. Johnson joined with me and said, "Nothing odd will do long. Tristram Shandy did not last." Or did it, Johnson? I expressed a desire to be acquainted with a lady who had been much talked of. It says here in a footnote this is Mrs. Caroline Rudd. And universally celebrated for extraordinary address and insinuation. Johnson said, "Never believe extraordinary characters which you hear of people. Depend upon it, sir, they are exaggerated. You do not see one man shoot a good deal higher than another." I mentioned Mr. Burke, Johnson said. "Yes, Burke is an extraordinary man. His stream of mind is perpetual." It is very pleasing to me to record that Johnson's high estimation of the talents of this gentleman was uniform from their early acquaintance. Sir Joshua Reynolds informs me that when Mr. Burke was first elected a member of Parliament, and Sir John Hawkins expressed a wonder at his attaining a seat, Johnson said, "Now we who know Burke know that he will be one of the first men in this country." And once, when Johnson was ill and unable to exert himself as much as usual without fatigue, Mr. Burke having been mentioned, he said, "That fellow calls forth all my powers. Were I to see Burke now, it would kill me." So much was he accustomed to consider conversation as a contest, and such was his notion of Burke as an opponent. Oh, so this is Lex Luthor as this Burke guy. Next morning, Thursday, March 21st, we set out in a post-chaise to pursue our ramble. It was a delightful day, and we drove through Blenheim Park. When I looked at the magnificent bridge built by John Duke of Marlborough over a small rivulet, and recollected the epigram made upon it, "The lofty arch his high ambition shows, the stream an emblem of his bounty flows," and saw that now, by the genius of Brown, a magnificent body of water was collected, I said, "They have drowned the epigram." I observed to Johnson, while in the midst of the noble scene around us, "You and I, sir, have, I think, seen together the extremes of what can be seen in Britain, the wild rough island of Mull and Blenheim Park." It's interesting, this footnote from me here, it's interesting that this section is a lot more about Boswell's observations, or at least equal to Boswell's observations to Johnson's. All right, footnote over. We dined at an excellent inn at Chapel House, where he expatiated on the felicity of England in its taverns and inns, and triumphed over the French for not having in any perfection the tavern life. "There is no private house," said he, "in which people can enjoy themselves so well as at a capital tavern. Let there be ever so great a plenty of good things, ever so much grandeur, ever so much elegance, ever so much desire that everybody should be easy. In the nature of things it cannot be. There must always be some degree of care and anxiety. The master of the house is anxious to entertain his guests. The guests are anxious to be agreeable to him, and no man, but a very impudent dog indeed, can as freely command what is in another man's house as if it were his own. Whereas at a tavern there is a general freedom from anxiety. You are sure you are welcome, and the more noise you make, the more trouble you give, the more good things you call for, the welcomer you are. No servant will attend you with a alacrity which waiters do, who are incited by the prospect of an immediate reward in proportion as they please. No, sir, there is nothing which has yet been contrived by man by which so much happiness is produced as by a good tavern or inn." That sounds nice right now. I wish I could go to one. He then repeated with a great emotion Shenstone's lines, "Whoe'er has travelled life's dull round, where'er his stages may have been, may sigh to think he still has found the warmest welcome of an inn." Okay, so we got some footnotes here. First was that last part about the tavern or inn. Sir John Hawkins has preserved very few memorabilia of Johnson. There is, however, to be found in his bulky tome on page 87 a very excellent one upon the subject. Quote, in contradiction to those who, having a wife and children, prefer domestic enjoyments to those which a tavern affords, I have heard him assert that a tavern chair was the throne of human felicity. As soon, said he, as I entered the door of a tavern, I experience an oblivion of care, and a freedom from solicitude. When I am seated, I find the master courteous, and the servants obsequious to my call, anxious to know and ready to supply my wants. Wine there exhilarates my spirit, and prompts me to free conversation and an interchange of discourse with those whom I must most love. I dogmatize and am contradicted, and in this conflict of opinions and sentiments I find delight. And the second footnote comes after that little part I just read. May sigh to think he still has found the warmest welcome at an inn. We happened to lie the night at the inn at Henley, where Shenstone wrote those lines. I give them as they are found in the corrected edition of his works, published after his death. In Dodsley's collection, the stanza ran thus. Whoever has travelled life's dull round, whatever his various tour has been, may sigh to think how oft he found his warmest welcome at an inn. Okay, end of footnotes. My illustrious friend, I thought, did not sufficiently admire Shenstone. That ingenious and elegant gentleman's opinion of Johnson appears in one of his letters to Mr. Graves, dated February 9th, 1760. I have lately been reading one of 2 volumes of The Rambler, who, excepting against some few hardiness in his manner and the want of more examples to enliven, is one of the most nervous, most perspicuous, most concise, and most harmonious prose writers I know. A learned diction improves by time. There's a footnote here. He too often makes use of the abstract for the concrete, says Shenstone. So Shenstone is the name of a place as well as this person, I guess. I don't know. Shenstone is just a person, I guess. It sounds like a place to me, but it's a person. Okay. Where was I? In the afternoon, as we were driven rapidly along in the post-chaise, Johnson said to me, "Life has not many things better than this." We stopped at Stratford-upon-Avon. Oh, I've been there. And drank tea and coffee, and it pleased me to be with him upon the classic ground of Shakespeare's native place. He spoke slightly of Dyer's Fleece. The subject, sir, cannot be made poetical. How can a man write poetically of surges and druggets? Yet you will hear many people talk to you gravely of that excellent poem, The Fleece. Having talked of Granier's sugarcane, I mentioned to him Mr. Langton's having told me that this poem, when read in manuscript at Sir Joshua Reynolds's, had made all the assembled wits burst into laugh, when after much blank verse pomp the poet began a new paragraph thus: "Now, Muse, let's sing of rats." And what increased the ridicule was that one of the company, who slyly overlooked the reader, perceived that the word had been originally mice, and had been altered to rats as more dignified. That's kind of funny. Such in this little laughable incident, which has been related by Dr. Percy, the Bishop of Dromore, who was an intimate friend of Dr. Graniger, and had a particular regard for his memory, has communicated to me the following explanation. The passage in question was originally not liable to such a perversion, for the author, having occasion in that part of his work to mention the havoc made by rats and mice, had introduced the subject as a kind of mock heroic, and a parody of Homer's Battle of the Frogs and Mice, invoking the muse of the old Gretchen bard in an elegant and well-turned manner. In that state I had seen it, but afterwards, unknown to me and other friends, he had been persuaded, contrary to his own better judgment, to alter it, so as to produce the unlucky effect above mentioned. The above was written by the bishop when he had not the poem itself to occur to, and although the accounts give it was true of it at one period, yet as Dr. Granger afterwards altered the passage in question, the remarks in the text do not now apply to the printed poem. The bishop gives the character of Dr. Granger, saying, he was not only a man of genius and learning, but had been made excellent virtues, had many excellent virtues, being one of the most generous, friendly, and benevolent men I ever knew. All right, now I'm totally lost. Where were we doing? Okay, so Johnson was talking about how he doesn't like Dyer's Fleece. Boswell was saying that he's heard many people say it was good. Or actually, he didn't say that. They were just talking about that, and then they talked about Granier's sugarcane. And then Boswell related the story of the muses singing of rats, and it was originally mice. This passage does not appear in the printed work. Dr. Granger, or some of his friends, it should seem, having become sensible that introducing even rats in a grave poem might be liable to banter. He, however, could not bring himself to relinquish the idea, for they are thus, in a still more ludicrous manner, periphrastically exhibited in his poem as it now stands. Now with less waste the whiskered vermin race, a countless clan to spoil the lowland cane. Johnson said that Dr. Granger was an agreeable man, a man who would do any good that was in his power. His translation of Tibullus, he thought, was very well done, but the sugar cane, a poem, did not please him. Dr. Johnson said to me, Percy, sir, was angry with me for laughing at the sugar cane, for he had a mind to make a great thing of Granger's rats. Johnson exclaimed, what could be made of a sugar cane? One might as well write the parsley bed or a poem, or the cabbage garden a poem. Johnson would be flabbergasted by poems nowadays, huh? I said, you must then pickle your cabbage with the sal atticum, Attic salt. Johnson said, you know there's already the hop garden a poem, and I think one could say a great deal about cabbage. The poem might begin with the advantages of civilized society over a rude state, exemplified by the Scotch, who had no cabbage till Oliver Cromwell's soldiers introduced them, and one might thus show how arts are propagated by conquest, as they were by the Roman arms. He seemed to be much diverted with this fertility of his own fancy. I told him that I heard Dr. Percy was writing the history of the wolf in Great Britain. Johnson said, the wolf, sir. Why the wolf? Why does he not write of the bear, which we had formerly? Nay, it is said we had the beaver. Or why does he not write of the grey rat, the Hanover rat, as it is called, because it is said to have come into the country about the time that the family of Hanover came? I should like to see the history of the grey rat, by Thomas Percy, D.D., chaplain and ordinancy of His Majesty. Laughing immoderately. Ah! I said, I'm afraid a court chaplain could not decently write of the grey rat. Johnson said, sir, he need not give in the name of the Hanover rat. Thus could he indulge a luxuriant sportive imagination when talking of a friend whom he loved and esteemed. I'm sorry, this is funny stuff, and I don't feel like I'm giving it a good reading, but hopefully you can get the idea. Not in a funny mood right now. Johnson mentioned to me the singular history of an ingenious acquaintance. James Granier, it says at the in the footnote. Spelled differently than... oh no, it's the same spelling of Dr. Granier. Is that the same person then? I don't know. This might be the doctor who wrote... that rat poem before, or it might be another one with the same last name. Quoting Johnson here. He had practiced physics, again, I think that just means medicine, in various situations with no real emolument. A West Indian gentleman, whom he delighted by his conversation, gave him a bond for a handsome annuity during his life, on the condition of his accompanying him to the West Indies and living with him there for 2 years. He accordingly embarked with the gentleman, but upon the voyage fell in love with a young woman, who happened to be one of the passengers, and married the wench. From the imprudence of his disposition, he quarrelled with the gentleman, and declared he would have no connection with him. So he forfeited the annuity. He settled as his physician in one of the Leeward Islands. A man was sent out to him merely to compound his medicines. This fellow set up a rival to him in his practice of physicians, and got so much the better of him in the opinion of the people of the island that he carried away all the business, upon which he returned to England and soon after died. Now, there's a misprint in my copy. I probably can't see, but there's only one footnote down here, but there's several notices that there's going to be a footnote for acquaintance, West Indian gentleman, and then a young woman. But it's missing. It's not on this page, so you're going to have to use your imagination who those people were. Anyway, on Friday, March 22nd, having set out early from Henley, where we had lain the preceding night, we arrived at Birmingham about 9 o'clock, and after breakfast went to call on his old school fellow, Mr. Hector. Footnote here. Mr. Hector's house was in the square, now known as the Old Square. It afterwards formed part of the Stork Hotel, but it was pulled down when Corporation Street was made. A marble tablet had been placed on the house at the suggestion of the late Mr. George Dawson, marking the spot where Edmund Hector was the host, Samuel Johnson the guest. This tablet, together with the wainscoting, the door, and the mantelpiece of one of the rooms, was set up in Aston Hall at the Johnson's centenary, in a room that is to be known as Dr. Johnson's room. I wonder if that still exists. I'd like to see that sometime. Anyway, a very stupid maid who opened the door and told us that Her Master was gone out. He was gone to the country. She could not tell when he would return. In short, she gave us a miserable reception, and Johnson observed she would have behaved no better to people who wanted him in the way of his profession. He said to her, "My name is Johnson. Tell him I called. Will you remember the name?" She answered with rustic simplicity and the Warwickshire pronunciation, which I will not try to do. "I don't understand you, sir." "Blockhead," said Johnson. "All right. I never heard the word blockhead applied to a woman before, though I do not see why it should not, when there is evident occasion for it." He, however, made another attempt to make her understand him and roared loudly in her ear, "Johnson!" And then she catched the sound. Now, there's a footnote here about using the word blockhead to apply to a woman. My worthy friend Mr. Langton, to whom I am under innumerable obligations in the course of my Johnsonian history, has furnished me with a droll illustration of this question. An honest carpenter, after giving some anecdote in his presence of the ill treatment which he had received from a clergyman's wife, who had a noted termagant, and whom he accused of unjust dealing in some transactions with him, added, "I took care to let her know that what I thought of her, and being asked, 'What did you say?' answered, 'I told her she was a scoundrel.'" So you can call a woman a blockhead and a scoundrel. Good to know. We next called on Mr. Lloyd, one of the people called Quakers. He, too, was not at home, but Mrs. Lloyd was, and received us courteously and asked us to dinner. Johnson said to me, "After the uncertainty of all human things at Hector's, this invitation came very well." We walked about the town, and he was pleased to see it increasing. All right, so that's it for today. Sorry about the unenthusiastic reading of the funny parts. It's too bad when you get to a funny part that I was a little blasé about it in my reading, but what are you going to do? That's what happens when you read every day. Some days are good, some days are bad. Till next time, bye from Boswell.